part of our summer culture is that we believe that we hear from God.
There's a step in which I learn that God talks to me. There's a whole nother step that says that God talks to you, and that I have the ability to accept that. And then, of course, John has the ability to speak it and share it.
Hey, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, where you may be. Listen, it is right now. It is March 30th, which means we're in the middle of all of the COVID stuff, and we're getting ready for Tempus Divum to do our plan for Easter. When we talk about Easter, we are by definition talking about the resurrection. Now, to be clear, of course, right now, like the situation in the world is a little bit unusual, so we don't have our normal camera and everything else. I'm doing this outside at the park. One of the few places we get some quiet around the shop. And when we talk about Easter, then of course we're talking about the resurrection. And to be clear, we talked about this. We put this on the schedule months and months ago. In fact, it was back in January. And I don't know why. Presumably just a call from the Lord. I've just really had it on my heart to talk about the bodily resurrection as a real serious thing. I didn't really know what that was about, but it seemed really important. But the thing is with all of the coronavirus business, we almost canceled it. We almost canceled this whole topic and just did something that was lighter. But the truth is, the more we thought about it, the more this seems actually much more appropriate, much more important, given the situation where it is. So to kind of get into it, the session you're about to see comes from actually a woman who is a teacher at George Fox University. Go Bruins. And it was given at my church actually several weeks ago, probably close to a month and a half ago now. And as I was listening to her, I thought that's the sermon that we need to have on Tempus Divum. So just the way this is played out, it turned out to be, I think, actually really germane. So here's the thing. Right now, a lot of people, a lot of sermons, they're talking about fear. They're talking about how Jesus gives us a command not to fear. And it's not just a good idea. It's a command, but also it's a hope. It's a desire to know that God doesn't give us a spirit of fear, which is absolutely true. But let's just be clear. What are we afraid of? We're afraid of boredom, I guess. We're afraid of certainly a lot of economic situations, losing our jobs, layoffs, that kind of thing. Those are, just be sure. But aren't we really talking about death? Are we really talking about the fear of either maybe if we're young and healthy, maybe we're not so much afraid for ourselves, but there's a lot of reason to be fearful for other people, for loved ones, for folks around us. And I think about a member of our team recently. His grandmother passed away, and they can't have a funeral. They can't remember her and grieve her the way that you normally would. Now, she didn't die of coronavirus, but it's just the timing of the thing makes death feel very potent. John's mom is in a facility with a bunch of older folks who feel very at risk, very no one knows what's going to happen next. Now, to be clear, Amy's doing just fine, but it makes you think. Now, Paul says that the resurrection is the cornerstone of our faith. It's not the cross. He says that without the resurrection, without the hope of our physical bodily resurrection, we're the most to be pitied, because we put our whole faith in a lie. This idea that it's not death that has the final word. To be clear, there's no promise that we'll be just peachy keen and kind of live fruitful, happy, healthy lives until Christ returns. That's not the promise at all. In fact, it's the opposite. But what it's the promise is that death doesn't get to win. And that this thing that is sort of it puts the lie to any section of faith, any section of philosophy, that in the end, that we all die. That's what he says is he's staking all of Christianity on this one thing, that we get to live again. That the center of the Christian faith is not the cross, it's not forgiveness, but rather it's life, and life to the full, and physical bodily life. The first, the cross, makes the second, the empty tomb, makes it possible. Now, our hope isn't also that we'll just carry on in the spirit world, right? It's not just that we'll be sort of like happy, haloed ghosts rolling around in our with our wings and our harps up in heaven. Although for a lot of people, that's their entire picture of what comes next. This is just a really thin, boring, ephemeral existence. It just happens to be better than and sort of like fire and brimstone. But that's not the promise. The promise is that we are resurrected in the body, in flesh and blood. And not just that, but that we have bodies that eat and drink. In fact, Isaiah 25 talks about a great feast in heaven where there's going to be lots of wine and best meat, whatever you think about that, when it says God swallows up death forever. Let me just also point you to Soma's logo. We chose Vitruvian man. I should say the logo was chosen for us, but Vitruvian man to me speaks to a question of that we wanted a logo that spoke to something that was deeper than just, than, I don't want to say just the spiritual, but not only the spiritual. That our original glory is older than our original sin. That there is something there's truth and dignity and holiness in the flesh and blood that we carry, and that it is in our bodies that God made us fearfully and wonderfully. And all of the imperfections, whether we're too heavy, too thin, too tall, too short, too bald, too gray, whatever it is, that all of those imperfections in the body are part of what Jesus says, that all things are made new. That's what happens. That's how we get redeemed and restored when our King returns. And so if we really get to that place where death has no sting, and it's true that we can get through to that spot where it doesn't scare us, it doesn't have any power over us, not for us, not for our loved ones, well, what then? How would you live differently? How would you see these strange days with all of the virus and all the uncertainty, all the complications? How would you live differently? Now, I don't know what the answer to that. I think it's different for everybody. But it better mean something. It better mean something for you, or else you're missing something that's critical, perhaps the critical point of the Christian faith. So with that, by the time this goes live, I want to wish you a blessed Easter. I want to wish you kindness and hope and a fearlessness. It means that all that can come before us, that it just withers before the hope and the glory of our Christian faith. So I pray that this sermon will bless you, and we'll have more of these coming back. Bye-bye.